Okay. Before we officially start the meeting, I'd like to read a statement from our governor. On March 13, 2020, Governor Greg Abbott issued a declaration of emergency as a result of the COVID-19 virus outbreak. Subsequently, on March 16, 2020, pursuant to the authority granted in the declaration, Governor Abbott temporarily suspended the application of certain provisions of the Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551, in order to permit telephonic open meetings. This was an effort to mitigate the spread of the COVID-19 virus by avoiding large group meetings while still ensuring continued governmental operations and preserving transparency in the decision-making process. Pursuant to this authority, the Tarrant County College District gave notice of its intent to conduct today's work session meeting as a telephonic and video conference open meeting. 6 trustees will participate in this meeting by video conference or telephonically. Ms. Teresa Ayala, Dr. Diane Patrick, Dr. Michael Evans, Dr. Gwendolyn Morrison, and Mr. Kenneth Barr. If a trustee's face is not visible, he or she will state their name before making any comment during the meeting. I will now call the work session of the Board of Trustees for August 13th, 2020 to order. And I don't believe there's any public comment. First, item 3 is review of board business items. The minutes of item A is the minutes of our work session of June 20th. Has everybody reviewed that? Any questions or suggestions or changes? Okay, item B is the Board of Trustees meeting minutes of June 18th. Does anybody have any changes suggested on that? Okay, very good. Okay, moving on to item 4. And this is the first 2 inches of your book. Yeah. Review of proposed consent agenda items for a board meeting on August 20th, 2020. Item A is consideration and approval of Texas Association of School Boards Local Policy Update 38. Ms. Carol Bracken.
Good afternoon, President Heath, board members, Chancellor Giovannini. As you know, twice a year, TASB gives us revised policy for our local policy, board policy. This local policy 38 update relates to changes that were instituted by the legislature in the 86th legislature last year. The changes in this are not as substantial as the changes that have already been made in our legal policy, which is where the actual statutes are addressed. All of the revisions are attached in your materials, and we recommend that they be approved.
Anybody have any comments on item A? I would like to say that I am extremely pleased that we can now deposit all our gold bullion in the Texas depository. I don't know how much of that we have, but I'm glad it's going to be kept in Texas. Item B, consideration and approval of EE local policy revision. Dr. LeBlanc.
Good afternoon, Mr. Heed, board members, and Chancellor. This is consideration of policy that has been updated that addresses curriculum development and procedures. So it's the policy for curriculum development, and that requires your approval. There's also an attached document that's called EE procedure, which includes all the procedures that we use in the curriculum and educational planning process and the strategies for revising, deleting, and adding the curriculum. So moving forward, we are taking procedures out of the policy and keeping the policy simple And that allows us to be more nimble and make adjustments to the procedures over time without having to bring it to you because the policy itself would not change. So that's for your approval. And I'm available for questions.
Questions, comments?
Hi, this is Teresa. I do have a couple of clarifications.
Yes.
Thank you. It's good to see you all. On page number where we talked about EE, where the procedures are now outlined.
Yes.
There's a section here that talked about if there are going to be any revisions and deletions or addition. I think deletions, revisions, and additions, or something like that.
Right.
But anyway, it's going to be. It talks about where it's going to be discussed. So my question is does the BPAA have the final say so on whether something moves forward, or is he or she part of a committee that makes that decision?
Right. So it's a lengthy process. So the vice president for academic affairs from each campus, they work as a team.
Okay.
And yes. And so
it would be a collective group of them would be.
Yes.
Okay.
All of it
Thank you for that.
Actually is collective. It involves, unless it's a program that's unique to one campus, but even then it's discussed by all of the campuses before moving forward. And the faculty have to lead that effort.
Okay. And then also there's a reference on page 2 under that EE section, and it talks about the research and development program and the campus teams represented, or the BPAAs, the chancellor's team. Who is that? Who's the chancellor's team? Is that just the presidents, or who is that consist of? It's under research and development program EE.
You say that's on page 2?
Page 2 of 6, under the EE section.
Yes.
Because then it goes on to say something about from college leadership. So I'm just trying to figure out who all these groups are. They might be the same group.
Thank you for asking that. So the final decision is not the VPAAs. We have different phases. They do pull everything together, and we bring it to the entire team, the entire cabinet.
Okay.
That includes the chancellor and the presidents and myself and others.
Okay.
Because there's more to it than the curriculum itself. There's also, are there facilities issues? Are there personnel issues? All of that.
Right. Okay. No, that makes sense to me. I just wanted to make sure, because there was some different references, and I wanted to make sure I was clear on who that was.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dr. Pavon.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Gwen Morrison. May I ask a question, please, Mr. President?
Certainly.
Are these the procedures that are being removed from the policy? They're in our booklet in red. Are those going to be deposited in another document and maintained as a procedure?
Yes. So this will be this will be available to all of the faculty, instructional leaders, and others in a separate document. Additionally, TASB moving forward will have an area where they will log the procedure, which is why we put it in the same format as the board policy. So you have two documents. You have the actual board policy, that's EE local, and then you have the procedure that's using a similar template, because both will be found on the TASB website.
Okay, and these become effective once we pass them?
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Well, I guess my last question would be, are the changes that we're making today going to cause a substantial way in the way we do business? Or is this just?
So we have been making adjustments to how we revise the curriculum in the last couple of years. And the reason for that is that we want to move things a little more quickly. We want to be more effective and more efficient. And so we basically have moved in this direction, and this is documenting the changes that we are making and that everyone's prepared to take action on.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to item 4C, which is consideration and approval to amend CC local to add reserve policy and adopt CAD local to create a debt policy. Ms. Susan Alanis.
Yes, this is formalizing some financial policies by the board. And the first one, there is an existing section on the operating budget, and we are recommending that we amend that. And actually, I think there's some slides that they're going to pull up for me to include reserve policies so that we've got some clarity around what our reserve targets are. It includes an unrestricted operating reserve of 6 months or 50% of operating expenses, and we'll calculate that on a budgetary basis. We're well in excess of that right now. It's a very conservative policy and fairly rare for organizations to be able to set it at 50%, but that's what we are recommending at this point. We're also establishing a capital project reserve, which is where we do our cash funded projects with no minimums, since those are controllable expenditures. And then our debt service reserve, since we've newly established a debt service fund of a 2 to 3 month 2 to 3 months of payments of the highest forecasted debt service. And you'll see an action item later on today that establishes that for our debt program for the upcoming year. Next slide. The second.
Susan, yeah, under restricted operating reserve, 6 months sounds like a long time. Is that standard policy, or?
It is a long time. I mean, healthy organizations often have that at 3. Because we are in a pretty healthy situation, we've got the room to do that and still have flexibility beyond that for any future capital expenses that we might want to shift that to. This is something that we should review annually as we put our budget together and have an assessment of that. We're probably closer to 9 months right now, but speaks to the health of our organization at this point. Okay, next slide. So the second one is adding a policy related to debt, which we didn't previously have. And essentially, it's just good practice for us to identify the metrics by which we would make decisions about future tranches of debt and the affordability of future bond programs. You may recall that before you called this last election, staff actually presented to you all of these metrics as part of that to show the health of our organization. We also set some conservative ground rules around our debt structure, that we shouldn't use debt for things that or set debt terms longer than the useful life of the asset that we're improving. And then set some parameters of when we would refinance. Quite frankly, this issue was so in such positive territory that's unlikely to be an issue. And then just the way that we would structure our equal principal or level debt service payments to ensure that we don't have any balloons at the end for good fiscal planning. So this is just intended to set that policy. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, comments?
Susan, this is Teresa. Hi. I have just a quick clarification on page 1 of 4. It really doesn't appear to be a section that's been changed, but as I was reading through this, I wanted to make sure I understood. Under the annual plan for capital outlay expenditures, it talks about each year and preparing the operating budget. We're going to look at expenditures and things like that, and something's going to be presented to the board. It says that the plan may include planned multiple allocations of specified amounts from the contingency reserve over 2 or more years. So what does that mean essentially? That we're only looking at those over 2 or more years, or and nothing less than that? Or can you clarify what that means?
So in other words, if we're doing a cash set aside for particular capital projects,
right,
that allocation may be reflecting the next couple of years as we're doing some major project. Is really, quite frankly, that is existing language that may not be as clear as it needs to be.
Right.
So we can definitely take a look at that before.
If you don't mind, I think, because I don't think that's what we intended. It almost looks like if it's less than 2 years, what does that mean? So I just wanted to ask the question so we don't come back to this at some point and wonder what we meant by that.
Agreed.
Thank you for that.
Any other questions, suggestions, comments?
I do have another one, if I may, Mr.
Sure.
Reed. Yes, on page 2 of 4, Susan, under the reserve section, unrestricted operating reserve, it talks about the reserves are unreserved and undesignated. And then it talks about maintaining minimum levels or minimum of 6 months. So I didn't know if we meant, because further down, we talk about minimum levels, and here we talk about minimum of 6 months. So are they the same thing as far as what we're going to do under capital project reserve and unrestricted operating reserve?
Yes, we're establishing 50% and 6 months of expenditures as our baseline.
Okay, so I was going to suggest if we could just make that clear to say minimum levels on both of them, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Thank you. This was really easy read, I thought. So whoever worked this language, thanks so much. Very clear.
Any other questions, comments? We'll move on to 4D, consideration, approval, and execution of 3 deeds from property tax foreclosure. Ms. Bracken?
The city of Haltom City recently foreclosed on three properties within their city limits for failure to pay property taxes. And they have requested that the district, along with all of the other taxing authorities, sign on the deeds conveying the properties to the purchasers at these sales. We're being asked to do that because we are a beneficiary of that. And as soon as the deeds are fully executed and filed, the monies that were paid at the tax foreclosure sale will be given pro rata to the various taxing authorities.
One of the properties, I think the settlement figure was $200 and some odd. Did that cover the taxes?
Probably not. It's not unusual especially if it's a really rundown property, for the properties not to be completely discharged from the debt.
Okay. Questions, comments?
So what does that mean, Susan? Does that mean that the taxes still remain with the property?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Until the property is paid off, until the tax is paid off, the new owner will have gotten the property for a very low price, but they'll have to continue to deal with that tax arrearage. The new owner will.
Good question.
My next question to that is, so is there an agreement made with the new owner as to the time period that they have to clear the delinquency? Is that a part of the negotiation?
It's just handled according to the statute, and every city deals with that a little bit differently. Every city has its own kind of time frame on how long they'll allow taxes to go unpaid. Most of them, it'll be, it can go as much as a couple of years, especially if the new owner is perhaps somebody who's over 65 or disabled.
I see.
But every month they accrue penalty, yeah,
and interest.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to item 4E, consideration and approval of non-credit tuition and fees. Dr. LeBlanc.
Yes, so it is recommended that the board approve the non-credit tuition and fees. It's a pretty thick packet of information that you received. Attached to this action item are 3 reports. Each report addresses a different aspect of the non-credit courses. And so we are recommending that you approve these changes in fees.
Any questions, comments?
Hi, this is Teresa. May I pose a question, Mr. Heath, please?
Certainly.
Thank you. Dr. LeBlanc, thank you for this. I do have a couple of questions. In particular, there was one under the section for offered with tuition different than the course. And it's on page 1 of 12. And it is referring to youth programs and camps.
Yes. So are you looking at report C? Report C would be the courses.
It says at the top, continuing education, non-credit course and tuition reports for sections offered with tuition different than course.
Sections. So the sections, the difference between the changes in tuition for sections versus courses.
Right.
The sections might be a special tuition for a special audience. And so it often is offered in cases where it's a course that was required by an entity. If you look at, that's under report B, most of those items are linked to like the police academy, fire academy, because the fire chiefs will come in and say, we need a special course in X, Y, and Z. They'll create it, and then they charge a certain tuition for that. It's based on how much it costs to bring in the instructor and the resources and so on. If you have a specific program, I would need to check into it, but I'm happy.
Okay, I you know what I do, and I can send you an email. It seems like it's around things for a Jubilee orientation for first and second, third and fourth. I'm hoping that I'm not reading that all of a sudden people are going to be charged, $220 for a course. So I can send that to you and get further clarification.
Yes, I'm happy to do that.
What I don't want is that we're pricing something where it becomes too expensive for somebody to pay for. And but again, I just want to make sure that I'm not reading it I'm reading it properly. The other one I had was there was a GED section, Dr. LeBlanc, and one of them showed that there was a tuition grant funded, and then another one showed under comprehensive prep that there was a fee. And I know we've talked about these before, so I don't know if they're two different items, but one of them did show there was a 0 and the other one showed that there was a fee. Could you talk to that a little bit, please?
They are two different items, and we have traditionally offered both. We do have some grant-funded opportunities through Workforce Solutions, basically that Workforce Solutions, Adult Basic Ed, and those are free in that it's covered by that grant.
Right.
The other opportunities that are not covered by the grant, we have a fee for those individuals. And we have actually, over the years, had fees. We've had both, actually.
Okay. So who was subject to the one that's for the fees? Who would be subject to the fee?
Yeah, so we have individuals that qualify for the grants, and there are certain criteria that individuals must meet to qualify for the grant, and I can get you that information. And then those that don't, we still make available courses for them to move forward with their GED.
Okay. So what you're saying is we do have students, some people that are coming to us that are paying a fee and some
Yes,
are not.
We always have.
Okay. And we've always had that. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll send the specifics to you, and then if you could just let us know what the details are on that, that would be great.
That would be fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. LeBlanc.
So, Dr. LeBlanc, are you saying that when we speak to the public that we're no longer offering the GED for free, that when they used to come through community campuses, continuing ed? Because when they came through continuing ed, it was gratis, and when they came through like the college, it was a fee. So has that structure changed?
Not really.
Okay.
It's an issue of communication. We have had the grant funded adult basic ed courses for many years, and those were free in that they were funded by the grant. We've also had the courses that we offered for a fee. We've done both, and we have both. But I can send to you, I don't have in front of me the specific criteria for those who qualify for the adult basic ed grant dollars. And we do work in partnership with the other entities in the community that have adult basic ed, such as the public schools, as an example. They're all coming out of the same funding. And I can look into that and share that with you.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a need for additional sponsorship or funding for some of these programs?
Well, like all the other programs that we have, we keep tuition low, and we try to find sponsors that would, through grants, through scholarships and such. So we do a lot to help folks, and working with the adult basic ed workforce solutions, applying for those monies is one effort.
Is this something that maybe our foundation could take a look at to see if they can find some additional sponsors? Does this lend itself to that kind of an effort?
I'm sure that would be welcomed.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
Item F, consideration and approval of a letter agreement with Barnes & Noble to invoice Tarrant County College District for the cost of science lab kits ordered by students to be paid with CARES Act funds when eligible. Dr. LeBlanc.
Yes, so thank you for this. Again, in March, when we transitioned from face-to-face to online, we needed to find ways in which to support the science faculty with the labs. And they were really awesome. They came up with solutions. There are lab kits that can be purchased for individuals that choose to take online science courses. And Barnes & Noble were willing to work with us in acquiring the lab kits. And of course, because all of this was due to COVID, we are able to pay for these lab science kits through the CARES Act money that we receive. This is simply documenting how we are managing this process because we do have to submit documentation for how we are spending that money.
Would this include chemistry lab kits?
Yes, so the science faculty really worked hard at identifying either lab kits or software that would meet the needs and where the students would acquire the skills that they would acquire if they were in a lab situation. It's not their favorite thing to do, but it is very workable. And I noticed in the enrollments, we've actually had an increase in the science courses in terms of students signing up. I thought that was interesting.
Okay. Well, having taught chemistry as a grad student, some of these things can be a little dangerous. And you wouldn't believe what some of these students will do with those chemicals. Are these, and I'm serious, are these supervised? I mean, are the kits to be used by the students by themselves, or is it during a Zoom presentation?
It's a little bit of all of the above, because the faculty are aware of what you just described. And it's my understanding, and that's why they vetted this very carefully, that the lab kits are safe. It is no different from, cooking can be dangerous too. And there are safety issues that we put in place when we're in the kitchen. So it's similar to that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, item 4G, consideration and approval of the instructional agreement with Tarrant County College and Crowley ISD, CISD for dual credit courses at the Bill R. Johnson Career and Technology Center, Crowley Collegiate Academy.
So this is brought to your attention for your approval because there is a value exchange agreement involved, and you will see the details in the summary and as well as the MOU. Basically, there's an exchange in return for tuition. We would get the use of the facilities and embedded faculty, et cetera. And so we've looked at this very carefully and agree that it would be beneficial to all parties. And we call it value exchange.
Okay, two questions. One, you mentioned in there talking about this would allow us to do evening classes and weekend classes and those kinds of things, evenings. And how much of that do we anticipate? And then you also, and this may be in conjunction with that first question, you mentioned in there that this will help us with our relationship with the Tarleton Fort Worth campus. If you'd kind of explain that a little bit, I'd appreciate it.
Right. So we do have the opportunity to offer classes in the evenings and on weekends and in the summer. And I would have to get you the details on what courses those would be. However, it's a great opportunity for us to have space in that area, which is a growing area. In terms of Tarleton University, we have what we call a data sharing agreement, and we have expanded our partnership with them so that our students can make a seamless transition from Tarrant County College to Tarleton. And actually, with this MOU, the students would be transitioning from high school to TCC to Tarleton. Tarleton is developing junior level programs that they hope to offer there at that location. So it's really an exciting opportunity. And when we talk about pathways, this is a perfect example of how we would have seamless transition for our students, and they would be able to use the Crowley facilities, and which would make it very nice for them. There are also some special programs that require special space. They have a construction management, which we're developing, and we would be able to share that space. They have a vet tech area, which they've been wanting us to partner with them, and we will be able to use their space for that. So there are technical programs that are expensive to duplicate, but by using their resources, we'll be able to serve their students and ours.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? We'll move on to item 4G, consideration and approval of the ratification of a contract amendment with CenturyLink Communications contract in the annual amount of $22,296. Mr. Bob Pacheco.
Yes, CenturyLink is our main internet access that we have for the entire district. Back in 2018, we did an RFP and selected them to be the provider for 4 of our physical campuses. The one campus left out was Trinity Rivers, and last year they came up for RFP, and CenturyLink won that agreement as well. And so all we're really asking here is just to combine the two. We want to co-term it so that the contract will expire at the same time.
Okay, questions, comments?
Mr. President, that's actually, I think that I'm with you on the item. I just wasn't sure. It's item 4H.
4H, yes.
Okay.
If there are no questions, we'll move on to item 4I, which is consideration and approval of the annual renewal with SHI International for Cherwell service management in the amount of $109,800.
Yes, Cherwell is our what's called the IT service management system. And what that does is that it handles all our help desk tickets and calls and things like that. It uses a methodology called ITIL, which is kind of best standards for IT operations. And so what we're doing here is just asking for renewal of the software. Interestingly enough, we just finished a project for software rationalization, and we identified we had too many licenses. So in the process of renewing this, we're bringing down the license and lowering our cost by about $31,000.
Okay. Questions?
Could you explain? I just want a little bit of an explanation. What do you mean by too many licenses?
When we contracted initially several years ago, we have what these are is active users. So anybody who's using it, both our help desk, our 24/7 help desk that we contract out to Lucian, as well as internal services. And so the way we were using it, we were able to identify that some of these people who had actual licenses didn't need that they were just view-only users. And so by doing that, we're able to reduce the number of active users that we need on the system. So, and that came about directly from our software rationalization project.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Is this an annual fee?
This is an annual fee. Yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Then we'll move on to item 4I, which is consideration and approval of contract with Edmentum Holdings for the annual review in the amount of $157,859.69.
Yes, this is the software, the courseware, does assessments as well as provide lesson planning for high school equivalency that is used by our community education and engagement and workforce services. And so what we're asking for here is just a renewal of the software.
questions, comments? If there being none, we'll move on to 4K, which is consideration and approval of contract with Elsevier, Inc. for the spring 2022 nursing cohort training and enrollment in the amount of $142,332.50. And I'm given to understand that that number will be increased to $173,310.75. Dr. Sean Madison.
Yes, sir. That is correct. We anticipated the original amount when we first developed the estimate. However, we're seeing an increase in enrollment in the nursing with the School of Division of Nursing, so we needed to modify that particular amount. If approved, Elsevier will provide nurse education courseware and exams, and we will certainly make the necessary adjustments to the board packet if approved for the said amount, the said corrected amount, that is.
Okay, I was interested in it actually cost $837.25 per student.
That's correct.
And that obviously is not covered by tuition.
That's
Or
correct.
anything else. That's purely an expense of the college, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, as the Chancellor and I discussed this, this would certainly be an item that we could present to the TCC Foundation for possible sponsorship opportunity. A single deal like this that really helps our nursing students to pass their exams would be an ideal project for them, I would think.
Mr. President, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So this is access to the software for this program, am I correct?
That's correct.
So the student is responsible for accessing that software through whatever device they may have available?
That's correct.
So has the study been conducted as to, especially during this time, how students were able to successfully access that? And might we consider adding a device as a standard for this program?
No study has been conducted as of yet. We've also not received any inquiries that students have not been able to access the software, the courseware with prior administration of the codes. We certainly can look into that moving forward in terms of the device, access to a device. Students may already have access, but none of that has come forward as of yet, but we certainly will inquire with the Division of Nursing.
Thank you. Let me be personal. About 20 years ago, I had a student that was going to be entering medical school at Howard, and as a part of their list of things you need before you came to campus, a laptop that met certain requirements was listed. That was something that they had to present with or have, and especially since the world has changed to where we are now and unpredicted for the future, I would like to see us study that.
Mr. President, may I make a comment about this?
Yes, go ahead, Bob.
And so, Dr. Morrison, we actually have a program right now here at the school for the tablet devices as well as Chromebooks for our students. So any student in need that is lacking a device or even internet access, we'll be able to provide them this device, and whether they're in the nursing program or not. So we have that active going right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
I do. This is Teresa, if you don't mind. Do you mind, Mr. President?
No, not at all.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Madison, it's good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
One of the questions I have is how long do these students have access to this software? So if for a student, obviously they use it to prepare for the NCLEX, do they have access to it beyond that so they can go back and use it as a resource if they have to attempt to take it more than one time?
Well, as I understand it, the software and all of the items align with the duration of the course. So as students review or go over certain skills, they demonstrate mastery using various standardized assessments built into the actual software. The software is used then to identify areas where they require remediation, et cetera, and then they have an opportunity to retest. So that traditionally happens within the course of either the year or their time within the program. I can get clarification on that, but that's my understanding as it relates to how they use the software. And the beauty of this particular software is the fact that faculty are equipped with information sooner than later so that they can, in fact, provide the necessary interventions to hopefully keep students within the program. And so far, we've been successful, and we're definitely going to continue to study that.
So it's more of a proactive approach in helping them to prepare, to kind of foresee. Okay.
Yes, and intervention, and it is something that it's been used by a number of nursing programs nationwide. So what, and that's great. I guess what I'm looking at is what kind of support does this software provide any support to our students, let's say, that are having to take the test more than once? I hear it's a very difficult test. So I'm just curious what kind of support they get after that. We actually have two approaches. This Elsevier provides some support in terms of preparing for the NCLEX, and there's also software known as ATI that helps. So we have wraparound interventions for students to ensure their success in the program. So far, the program has been very successful in terms of the NCLEX pass rates. They've come in above the state average. So far, we're doing well as a college in terms of supporting students prepare for the NCLEX.
What is the state average, Dr. What is the state average, Dr. Madison?
The state average is in the 76%, and our average is 87%. And we're doing extremely well for, first of all, a program our size. We have one of the largest programs in the state, and also just the dedication and the resources that, the college affords us to ensure that our students maintain those pass rates.
Thank you for that clarification, Dr. Madison.
No, thank you.
That was part of my question. The other question is, has there been any studies done on the effectiveness of this program? In other words, pass rate before they get this training program and pass rate after?
There have been studies nationwide. We are now in the process of looking at perhaps ways in which we can replicate that study at TCC. The nationwide studies attest to the fact that the outcomes improve with the integration of these services that provided by Elsevier and ATI. They see an association between success rates, pass rates in this case for the NCLEX, and the use of this software, this courseware, if you will. But we certainly can look at how to frame a study to look at it in terms of TCC students.
Okay, and you also mentioned that you have an increased budget because of additional nursing students. How many do we have now? I mean, was this unanticipated?
It was unanticipated. Yes, it was not anticipated.
I know there's a demand for our nursing program, so that's kind of surprising that we have that capability.
Yes, we always, it's one of those situations where sometimes students make decisions. They'll come to TCC, then change their mind, and then go to another nursing program within our region or what have you. So sometimes it's hard to anticipate what students will do. In this case, students decided to stay with TCC, commit with TCC, and I like to think it's because we have an outstanding program at Tarrant County College. So they know that. The word is getting out.
Right. I think people know that. Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
I do have another question, if you don't mind, Mr. President. Dr. Madison, I'm just curious, the fact that we have our goals set for meeting the students where they are is one of them. can you tell me whether or not you have seen has anything changed as far as this program, the application itself that is more, what's the word I'm looking for, more customized and really are meeting the student where they are? Because obviously all students learn differently. So have you seen any changes? Are there opportunities for us to provide feedback on how we think that software could be more adaptable for our students?
Well, the software is always it's always evolving to align with the expectations of the NCLEX. You'll hear faculty talk about next generation NCLEX skills that need to be addressed. So as changes occur within the hospital community and skills needed to serve patients, et cetera, you're going to see those changes in the support to ensure that our students are prepared to provide quality safety measures, et cetera, and the clinical skills necessary to be successful on the floor. In terms of your original question, as it relates to any changes, what we've done is we've actually integrated, for example, a number of programs to ensure that we're casting a wider net so that more students can be successful. So one of the things since I've been there has been the evolution of Éxito Juntos, which is the vocational nursing program, which allows us to place more nurses, nursing students, that is, within that pipeline. And there are other types of programs like that as well. We've also been pretty successful with creating student nursing success centers within the department to ensure that our students persist from beginning to end. So those are some of the things that we've done within the nursing.
Great. Area. Thank you so much, Dr. Madison. Appreciate it.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you. We'll move on to 4L, which is consideration and approval of the purchase of 20 ADEC cabinet/console modules from Henry Schein for the Northeast Dental Hygiene Program in the amount of $221,880. Dr. Kenya Ayers.
Good afternoon.
Kenya Ayers Palmore.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Heed, board members, and of course our chancellor as well. I am pleased to represent this item, which reflects an opportunity for us to continue enhancements to the program that the board started several years ago. And basically we're asking for an upgrade to our cabinetry that has been in place for, someone said 40 years, it's actually 50 years of cabinets. And so we'd like to recommend this upgrade. And I'd like to talk just momentarily about the timing. One of the questions I would imagine you have is about where we are with the program. And I would share that we put a pause on this very important program. It's a highlight for TCC. It's well respected within the community. We put through 22 to 24 students per year. And we serve 500 to 600 members of the community. Those who are low income, senior citizens, pay a nominal fee of about $10 to utilize the clinic. We put both the clinic and the program on pause under COVID conditions until we could learn more about how to serve better. We now have students learning again in the program as of July. They are working with mannequins. We have not yet reopened the clinic, and we are working with our appropriate authorities to make a determination of when that will be. In order to make sure that we're being as sanitary as possible, having these upgraded cabinets that we can clean and sanitize will be a part of that process. We need some lead time. It takes 6 weeks for these to be built in Oregon. They're shipped to Texas, and then the Schein company installs them. So thank you for your consideration.
Yeah, I was fortunate to attend, I guess, a grand opening when the first upgrade was done a couple years ago. And I, having talked to some of the dental folks that were there that are actually dentists or dental assistants, they were highly impressed with that upgrade, and they considered it state of the art. And I asked at that time, and I don't know if we're doing this, but do we offer a like a continuing ed course for any of these dental assistants or even dentists to to get new skills?
Yes, sir. So we, I would say two things. I would say there's an opportunity and then there's what we're doing. So we have dental assisting and dental hygiene, and we are moving to ensure that there's a pathway so that students can take the classes on the CEE side, that we can make the migration into the transfer side so that there's a seamless transition. But in terms of continuing ed credits for dental professionals, I think there's a great opportunity there to be realized. So we will certainly follow up accordingly.
Okay, and I would like to make one observation. Since these take 6 weeks to build and then they got to be shipped and then 2 weeks for installation, I highly doubt that it's going to be done by August 20th.
No. This is for, that's why we're requesting them now. We certainly don't even know yet when we would reopen to the public, but the idea is that we get the ball rolling now in anticipation that we'll be ready for spring. But the students are already in place. They're working on mannequins. We still have cooperative relationships in the community with facilities that are open. So we're not hindered in our ability to serve students currently.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Dr. Ayers. We'll move on to item 4M, which is consideration and approval of a 3-year contract with Stericycle, Inc. to provide district shredding services up to an aggregate amount of $114,500 for the initial 3-year period. Ms. Alanis.
Yes, this is just a routine contract. We require shredding services because we handle so much confidential information across the district.
So these, you're shredding documents that obviously are of some sensitivity. I assume this company must be bonded, or how do we make sure that of our security?
Yeah, they are bonded, and they're also required to provide us certificates of destruction after they've removed items from us and disposed of them.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, we'll move on to item 4N, which is consideration and approval for use of purchasing cooperatives listed in the attachment A on an as-needed basis for authorized expenditures for fiscal year 2020 to 2021.
So annually, the board considers a list of different cooperative opportunities for the college to take advantage of for procurement. And so this is that annual effort to identify the different sources that we're able to access for that. You will have future board actions for actual spend authority for any items over $100,000 beginning in September.
Questions, comments? There being none, we'll look at item 4.0, which is consideration and approval of procedure for the acceptance of electronic sealed bids or proposals.
Yeah, so this is actually our effort to add technology to our current bidding process, which we think is highly desired among people who respond to our procurement opportunities, and also became very evident during COVID when our facilities were closed. And the education code requires the board to actually approve our ability to accept electronic sealed bids or proposals, and that is what this action item would accomplish.
Okay, I asked this question earlier and it was answered, but you might tell the board how security is achieved so that one bidder couldn't hack into our system and.
That's right. So to execute this or put it into production, we would actually contract with a software vendor who this is their business to do sealed bid proposals, and they have security aspects built in to ensure that the bids are confidential until they're opened as required by law.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? We'll move on to item 4P, consideration and adoption of minority and woman-owned business enterprise / historically underutilized business program.
Yes, the board received a briefing at last month's work session about the updates to the current plan and program associated with the college. At that time, we advised you that that state law requires us as a member of higher education to adopt the comptroller's plan, which actually has sort of expanded metrics for the goals for each category. Since last month, we have met with a variety of stakeholders in the community to get their feedback on the plan as it's proposed. At their recommendation, we've actually added a couple of additional certifying agencies here locally that are also authorized by the Comptroller's Office. And that includes the DFW Minority Supplier Diversity Council and the WBE Southwest organization, and certainly we think that the choices are expansive enough to make sure that nobody's negatively affected here locally in terms of vendors. So this is the opportunity to adopt that, and then starting this fall, we'll have regular updates to the board to grade ourselves against the metrics that are being established.
And those updates would be quarterly, as I understand, at least. Okay. And how do we, we talk about minority and women-owned. You also, one of the categories in there is disabled veterans. How do they get access to these programs? Do we have any proactive ways to encourage them to bid on contracts and so forth?
So that's actually a new addition to the policy based on adoption of the comptroller's plan, which reflected those as a potential target. And so one of the responsibilities that Andre McEwing will have as he prepares for his first quarterly report is to describe what he's done to integrate that aspect into our outreach plan.
Good, thank you. Questions, comments? I know they're there. Hey, Teresa.
Hi, I do have a couple, if you don't mind, Mr. President. I just want to compliment you all on this proposal. I read through every word of it, and I had written down, I don't know, 6 or 10 questions that I wanted to have answered, and then I read through everything, and it was all answered in here. So it looks like you did a really good job putting this together, it was a collaborative effort, and I appreciate that. I do just have just clarifications from my perspective. When we talk about the proposed program in the percentages, is that the percentage of participation or is that the percentage of spend?
That is, the participation is graded by spend. And so it's about the percentage of dollars that are expended. Okay, that's fine. And then the other question I had is I've seen reference to a $50,000 baseline. Was that a number that was proposed, I guess, and maybe I read that incorrectly, but under the proposed program, is it 50,000? Is that their amount? Is that our amount? Who established that number? Under state law, 50,000 is the threshold to do a formal procurement process, and so it mirrors that. Okay, that's fine. Thank you again. My compliments to everybody. This was very well put together, so thanks for all the detail. I worked very hard on it, so thank you for that. I know they did. It was a huge effort, so thank you.
Yeah, I would like to add my kudos to that as well. It's I should say it's about time we've done this. It's been too long since we've considered such a thing, and my compliments to the whole administration for looking into these kinds of things. We know this is so important, so thank you for that. Any other questions, comments? We'll move on to item 4Q, consideration and approval of deductive change order with weatherproofing services for the roof restoration project at Trinity River campus, the amount of negative $52,108.
That's correct. So this is a savings of the original budget amount associated with this project.
Questions, suggestions? Except to have more of these. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 4R, consideration and approval of ratification of contract with the Tax Assessor / Collector through tax year 2021 in an amount not to exceed $1,850,000.
Yeah, so this just memorializes our agreement with the tax assessor collector for the services that they provide to collect our property taxes.
Yeah, I would like to comment. We have never seen this or the next one in our agenda, and I feel like we should have. So I compliment you, Susan, and the administration for bringing these forward to the board for consideration.
Yes, sir.
Questions, suggestions, comments? We'll move on to item 4S, consideration and approval of ratification of payment of Tarrant County College District's pro-rata allocation of the Tarrant Appraisal District's 2020 budget for services associated with levying a property tax in an amount not to exceed $1,325,173.
Yeah, so this is, again, a memorialization of our arrangement with the Tarrant Appraisal District. All of the entities that use their services share their operating costs. We will receive a notice of our share for 2021 in November, and we will bring that action item back to the board for next year's contract as well.
Okay, questions, comments? We'll move on to item 5, which is review of proposed individual action items for the board meeting on August 20th, 2020. And item A is consideration and approval of a 3-year renewal, actually 37 months, of Cisco security software licenses and support with SHI International for an amount up to $1,081,876.27, which is $360,625.42 annually. Mr. Pacheco.
Yes, this is really comprises 4 different products from Cisco. It includes our anti-malware protection AMP. It's the equivalent of your antivirus software you have on any of your computers and your phone, things like that. Second item is the AMP Threat Grid appliance. It's a application appliance that's used to track and try to eliminate threats that are coming into the school. The third item here is the Cisco email appliance system, and it's a plug-in into our Office 365 to help us scan for malware that comes into the school. And the fourth item is Stealth Watch, which is a forensic and network health monitoring system. These are tools that are used by our security infrastructure, and they're really much needed, and they're part of the backbone of our security infrastructure here at the school.
Am I correct that some of this is due to the fact that we distributed some new equipment to students and faculty? And secondly, wouldn't the CARE Act cover some of that expense?
That is something that we actually are going to look into. And part of that is you're absolutely right, at least from the point of view of the anti-malware protection for the endpoint devices, for like the tablets that we've issued and things like that. So there is some potential savings through CARES. It's just going to take a little bit of time to figure that out.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
Yes, Mr. President, I do have a question. Please, Teresa. Hi, Mr. Pacheco. Good to see you. On this particular, let's see, where it talks about the renewal of the Cisco security software licenses, as we migrate to and evolve to a cloud-based system, is this going to be less as far as the amount of, I know we're still going to have to maintain security, but is there going to be any direct impact as a result of that once we, like I said, move to a cloud-based system?
Probably not, to be,
okay.
Yeah, it's just, even with the cloud-based system and we're using the Microsoft Azure environment for Office 365, these are advanced tools to really help us, and it's used in conjunction with some of the stuff that we get with Microsoft.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, comments? Move on to 5B, consideration and approval of contract with McGriff, Seibels and Williams, Inc., RHSB, and Higginbotham for TCC's 2020 and 2021 insurance renewal in the estimated amount of $1,887,183. Ms. Alanis.
Yeah, so this is the annual action item for the board to approve our insurance procurement. Last year, we adopted a shorter duration so that we could align it more effectively with the fiscal year. I will share with you that this does reflect about $267,000 in increased premiums over last year as property losses across the state just are incorporated into what every entity is facing.
Questions, comments? Okay, we'll move on to item 5C, consideration and approval of contract with Trevino Group, Inc. to renovate the bookstore at Trinity River campus in the amount of $365,251.88.
Yeah, so this is modifying space at Trinity River, and there's been a concerted effort to make space to relocate services that serve students along Main Street so they're more accessible and so on, consistent with the criteria that have been established through the principal's work. And so this is actually shrinking the bookstore and making that space available for that purpose.
I understand that we're making extra room for what's called a writing room. Is that correct? What is a writing room?
It's a writing center where students who are working on written assignments, essays, and so on are able to seek assistance with that. It's like a math lab or any of the other tutoring services that we provide.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Any other questions, comments? We'll move on to item 5D, consideration and approval of contract with Freedom Construction for renovation of the Student Center at Northeast Campus in the amount of $406,934.56.
Yeah, so this is also an effort to relocate services to a more accessible location. Currently advising and counseling at Northeast are located on the second floor, and it's got some challenges in terms of the staircase to access it and so on. And so this is an opportunity to realign it and serve students more effectively.
I noticed that a number of these items are contracts with Freedom Construction. Where are they located?
They are located in Azle, so right here in Tarrant County.
Okay, super.
And they're also an MWBE.
Super. Any other questions, comments? There being none, we'll move to item 5E, consideration approval of the contract with Cables Plumbing for sanitary sewer replacement at Northeast Campus in the amount of $492,531.33.
So the sanitary sewer system at that campus is 52 years old, and some of the original mains are even clay like they used to be back in the day. And so this is an opportunity to replace that deteriorating condition.
Is there any opportunity to increase the speed of doing that since the campus is somewhat closed, all closed, partially closed?
So in every instance with our construction projects, we're taking advantage where we can, where there's the possibility of accelerating the speed of projects because of that. And quite frankly, with the reduction of interference, if you will, in terms of other people being on campus, it certainly is having that effect. So the team is definitely cognizant of that desire.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? All right, we'll move to item 5F, consideration and approval of contracts with multiple vendors for the LED lighting upgrade project at South Campus in the amount of $1,345,339.60.
Yes. So as you're aware, the 2019 bond program had a big MEP component. And so we've been planning all the lighting upgrades that are necessary at the various campuses, and this continues that effort at South Campus.
One of the aspects of doing this is the savings in energy. Has there been any calculation on a payback for this kind of expenditure, or?
So they've definitely assessed that to some degree, and so I can get some additional information and distribute it before the board meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? We'll move to item 5G, consideration and approval of contracts with multiple vendors for the emergency power upgrades at South Campus in the amount of $628,900.96.
Similar to the last project, this has been part of the 2019 bond program of taking care of the infrastructure of our facilities. And again, at South Campus.
Questions, comments? I know that we're expecting some energy savings here as well, so I'd kind of like to get an idea of what you anticipate. Item 5H, consideration and approval of contract with Chambers Engineering, LLC for building envelope modifications and improvements on South Campus in the amount of $175,302.07.
Yes, so this is also a project to address energy efficiency in that particular building on South Campus where they're having air escape and that kind of thing. And so they've done an assessment and will be making improvements to the building envelope to improve that.
Questions, comments? Item 5I, consideration and approval of the contract with Freedom Construction for the renovation of Health Sciences Building at South Campus in the amount of $496,979.
Yeah, so this is an aged facility that is in need of renovation, and we're coupling that with an opportunity for us to implement a prototype of some of the new design thinking related to the open concept of workspaces. In this instance, deans who are currently distributed in multiple places will be co-located, and the intent is to allow them to have cross-training and collaboration that meets a lot of the criteria that we've been working on through the principal work. So it's an opportunity for us to implement what we've been talking about.
And how many more students will that allow us to have up there? And that's number one. And secondly, since this is new equipment, new technology in the welding field, do you have any idea of how much more their earning power would be increased?
And I'm sorry, you and I may be on different items. I was on 5I with the Dean Suite renovations.
No, I'm sorry, that was next question. Okay.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. President, this is Gwen Morrison. I have a question related to the Dean Suite renovation. Although, are we still allowing them to have private or spaces where they can hold confidential conversations with students?
Yes, so every one of the spaces that we are renovating under our new criteria include options for confidential conversations, huddle spaces for folks that need to concentrate, and so on. And so we definitely intend to capture that need.
So explain that a little bit more in elder terminology. When you say confidential spaces, will they have individual offices that have a door that can close, or would they have to go into a room, or what do you mean by that?
There would be shared spaces that they can go into for confidential conversations. The offices will be in more open workspaces, more collaborative, open workspaces, consistent with a lot of the modern design that you see today.
So looking at that again, post-COVID, might that need some reevaluation? And I know we're moving to a younger population, aged population, who may be more comfortable with the open workspace. But many times, in my experience, when deans have needed to talk with me or the students, they've needed to reference something on their computer as we are speaking. And I just have a concern about that. And I will admit it has to do with my experience level. But I just have a concern I wanted to express about that.
Yeah, and interestingly, it is often a transition for people who've worked in a different environment in the past to move over. We've done some work with UNT, who's transitioned some of their spaces to these more open concepts, and actually the demand for it has grown now that people have seen the results of that. The huddle spaces where people are allowed to meet are also intended to have the ability for portable technology where they can take their computer right with them if they're meeting with someone or they're needing some concentration and so on. The other thing I'll hit on that you mentioned was concerns about COVID. Our standard workstation is 8 by 8, and so the intent is to be able to maintain appropriate distances, and we're working with our designers to incorporate whatever the best practices emerging from that thought are.
Okay, your statement led me to another question when you said they could take their computer. So in that 8 by 8 workspace, does a person normally have a desktop, or will they have portable computers, or what will that look like in terms of technology?
Yeah, so the intent is for us to be migrating more towards laptops that people can take up and take with them to the shared spaces that are available. In some instances, that will require a bit of a migration as we do our refresh program with our computer technology, but the intent is for people to have devices that they're able to carry with them.
Okay. So that might be another spend category that we have, is equipping all the offices with those devices, and then that would enable the faculty and staff to take those with them as they needed to, if they needed to do after hours work.
Yeah, and we'll implement that on an incremental basis with our normal expenditures associated with our refresh cycle that's about 5 years on all of our devices to make that happen. So I don't necessarily think it's going to be an added expense. It'll be built into our planning for technology refresh over time.
Thank you.
Along the same lines, if we're talking about 2 people in that room, is that correct?
So I'm going to ask them to pull up a slide for me that.
Not in the 8 by 8 space, surely.
No. Those are individual workstations, and I'm going to ask to go to slide 6. And this shows you the layout of the space, that there's meeting rooms. You can see in each corner, that's where an individualized workspace is, where that would be for them to occupy themselves. There are huddle rooms that are intended for a couple of people who may be meeting together, either in a meeting or if it's with a student and so on. So this gives you a sense of how that will work. I will tell you that the deans at this campus are excited about this, and we're willing participants in being the prototype for this. And I think it'll end up being a showcase for others who may be moving to those kinds of spaces going forward.
Will the faculty be there as well?
In this particular instance, this is associated with deans.
I'm sorry, say that again.
In this instance, these are deans, not the broader faculty members, although we're exploring similar concepts for faculty members going forward.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions, comments?
Mr. President, this is Teresa. I do have a question. Thank you. This is really helpful to see this schematic here. Ms. Elenise, you said this is part of the principal work, obviously, where we're getting to this point. Can you tell me a little bit about who all is involved in these decisions as far as the layout and things like that? Obviously, I guess you have dean representation, but who else is represented there?
Yeah, so Dr. Morales has been leading the workspace environment principle, and so he's had many people that serve not only on the panel, but also on various work teams for different aspects of this. And I would suggest that that perhaps, I don't believe he's on the line now where we can get his comments.
That's
now.
Okay.
We can provide some feedback going forward to share who all participated in that. But the intent all along is to have a wide variety of stakeholders involved in the discussion.
Right. Oh, that would be great. Thank you. If we could get a little detail, I'd just like to know, because I know it's a collaboration, but just be curious to see how that went. And obviously, as we go through the different campuses, we're also learning different lessons that we could possibly apply to the next round. So
sure. Sure,
Yeah.
and just to be real clear, that Workspace Environments has established broad criteria, and the intent is for real estate
Sure.
facilities to translate that into reality as we touch it.
I know, that's a challenge, I'm sure, but it looks good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was interested in hearing that new term, huddle room. Is that equivalent to a sticky space, maybe?
So sticky spaces are like hangout spaces for students, and we'll have similar concepts, and particularly as we move to MOC with all of the administrative staff over there, that there will be shared spaces for employees to also gather and want to hang out. Huddle spaces are intended to be more if you've got a conversation that you need to have with an individual and you need to be able to close the door, if you need to be able to concentrate rather than being in a more open area. And so there is a difference between the two, but we do intend to have sticky spaces in our employee floor plans as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? We'll move on to item J, consideration and approval of contract with GFC Construction for the Welding Technology Lab Expansion Project at the Irma C. Johnson Hadley Center of Excellence in the amount of $2,968,335.02.
Yes, and the board has been preparing for this for the last 2 years when discussion about the expansion of the program occurred, and that this is the latest in a series of contracts that have been let to address the expansion up at the Seattle campus. It is part of the bond program, and so it's exciting to be at this point.
Mr. President, it's Gwen Morris, and I have a question.
Sure.
The new guidelines or goals that we set for the MWBE that we're proposing to be set at this meeting, will those apply to the contracts we'll also be approving at this meeting?
Yeah, so we've always, for our construction contracts, had a 25% goal, which is similar to what is in the criteria for the revised program. And they are evaluated on their ability to meet that in the course of responding to the request for proposals. And so nothing has changed there. What will have changed is we will be coming back to you with quarterly reports that aggregate that to tell you how we're doing across our project delivery. So you'll be able to see the results of that.
Okay, so remind me if the proposal we are adopting that's been discussed today, does that increase our goal? What does that do for us in terms of our practices?
Yeah, so what it does do is it breaks out into smaller, more discrete categories, the goals. And I'm sorry, I said 25% a minute ago. Our official policy before was 20% for construction projects. It's actually, and I'm trying to flip back to that page, it's a little bit higher than that for general construction here, but beyond that, it also starts to hold us accountable for other types of procurements, professional services and things like that beyond construction. So in my view, it will give you much more information and us more information to see how we're doing in our outreach and the results that we're achieving.
Okay, thank you. Great.
Okay, my question, I'll reiterate it. How many more students will this enable us to service, and how much more earning potential will this give them, given that this is a new process, new welding process?
So I'm going to defer to Dr. LeBlanc, who I believe is prepared for this question. I think there's a total of 22 new welding stations that are accommodated here, but I know she's gathered information on this topic.
Right. Yes, thank you. So the welding area currently serves 174 students per semester over 3 periods during weekends and weekdays. The expansion of the booths will allow us to serve an additional 96 students for a total of 270 per semester, which will be 810 students per year.
Okay.
And I also have, in terms of, we have a software system called Burning Glass, and it gives futuristic information about jobs that are available. And the welding has 4,950 job postings within the last 12 months. And the pipe fitting has had 1,439 job postings within the last 12 months in this area. The salaries range from $35,000 to $43,000, which is pretty nice, given that the living wage in this area is $28,000. And the construction sector is growing in this area, and welding is a key part of that.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, discussion? We'll move on to item 5K, consideration approval of contracts with multiple vendors for the renovation of the Irma C. Johnson Hadley Center of Excellence on Northwest Campus in the amount of $431,483.
Yes, so you may recall that last month you approved the design for the renovations of the third floor of the Seattle location for the purposes of accommodating corporate solutions and the plans for that program. Since that time, we have, in consultation with Hillwood, who holds deed restrictions on our property in terms of design, and also working with the fire marshal, we've determined that an exterior staircase needs specific design elements that require us to amend that contract for design, and it's accommodated within the overall project cost. In addition, this prepares us for the AV equipment and installation that'll be necessary later on as well. We'll be coming back to you with the construction contract itself in September.
Okay. Questions, comments? Item 5L, consideration and approval of contracts with multiple vendors for redevelopment design services and construction at the Northwest Campus in the amount of, and put a comma after the 935. It's $22,935,788.
That is correct. So this is a continuation of our work on the redevelopment of the Northwest Campus, and we have prior contracts with Huckabee for buildings 1 and 2 that have been underway. This extends our contract for phase 2B, which is for related to buildings 3 and 4 and planning for construction drawings and contract administration as well. So this is the next phase of that design effort. The second part of this action item is the next contract with Skanska. That is the firm that was selected to do the work with for construction and be our construction manager at risk. We will come back to you over time with a series of guaranteed maximum prices as we get to the appropriate junctures in the design. And this particular contract is intended to help us with swing space, partial demolition, network operations center additions, and other infrastructure work that's going to be starting out there. So this is very exciting, and Skanska has been a great partner and looking at hitting 30% on MWBE for that as well.
Okay, I have several questions, and I'm concerned about whether or not we're trying to do the best thing we can for our college and for our students, and I'm wondering if in this design work, how does that work? Who decides what should be incorporated in that? Do we have standard designs, or do we go out and have Huckabee and Skanska come back to us with their suggestions? How does that work?
So Huckabee has a lot of experience in education, and so they certainly provide us guidance from that standpoint. In addition, all of the preparation work that has been happening over the last several years in anticipation originally of the bond program to define what the needs are has been in play. And then finally, the principal work where they've been developing criteria for the different elements of or different uses of the spaces is being incorporated. So as an example, we've got the student experience team working actively on where students would enter for financial aid and business services and all those kinds of things that they would need face-to-face interactions. And so each of those principals has a wide group of stakeholders that's helping us make those decisions along the way. So it's a collaborative effort, certainly, to get through that. Okay,
I specifically regarding the construction, Have we looked at ICF construction, which is insulated concrete forms? The construction, this is a construction technique that's used extensively in Europe, Canada, Mexico, Dubai, any place where there are very high or very low temperatures. It provides an R factor of 70 in terms of insulation, and it will withstand tornadic winds up to 240, 250 miles an hour. The Plano, Frisco, and Allen school districts are using that type of construction. The Corps of Engineers do not build any buildings these days unless it is that kind of construction. And I would like to suggest that we take a look at that for this new construction on Northwest Campus, because it provides better energy efficiency, greater protection for our students, and I would think that the safety consequences of this kind of construction would lead to lower insurance rates.
Sure. So we received your question, and we're gonna reach out to Skanska and others just for their guidance and feedback on that thought. Both the designers as well as the construction firm are very experienced in construction of both ISD and higher ed facilities, and so we expect that they're familiar with what's been utilized in other places, and so we'll get you an answer to that question.
Yeah, that'd be great. If we're talking about commercial construction, the cost of this is about the same. And so with the increased energy efficiency and increased safety for our students and protection of our buildings, I think it's certainly something for us to look at. And in the same light, you and I have discussed the PoE, power over Ethernet, which offers high energy efficiency, lower construction costs, lower maintenance, less fire and safety issues, and as a result of all this, much less insurance costs, I would expect. Have we looked at that? Are these companies taking a look at possibly incorporating that new technology, and it's not all that new, but that technology into our new buildings?
Sure. So they're familiar with it, and they're familiar with the project that we visited to take a look at it. I will tell you that it has not been used on a wide scale with a project of this size at this point, and I think that we've got some work to do with piloting and testing some of that thought process as we've discussed in some of our future projects. And so, but they are familiar with it. We've had conversations with them about it as well.
Yeah, that would be, I think, a very good thing for us to do. And if our people aren't too familiar with the program or aren't up on the benefits of it, I would suggest they take courses at Northeast Campus in our Cisco lab, because as you know, the buildings we visited, all the students there are graduates of TCC Cisco lab. And they're the ones that are doing the work. And it just seems to be that if we're teaching this kind of technology, it seems like we ought to be incorporating that in our buildings. What's the student supposed to think if we're training them in all this new technology and they're looking for jobs in that area, and we don't try to incorporate those technologies in the buildings that we're building? And on the other hand, looking at it from a different perspective, I also think that if we did something like this, both of these particular items, our students would be able to study the effect of these new technologies on an actual building as opposed to learning it just in theory. They could be looking at our own construction and see how those things are effective. So I really feel strongly that we ought to be looking at both those technologies for incorporation in our new building. And then also there's VRF, which is a variable refrigerant flow air conditioning. That's another item that it's highly energy efficient. It has less problem with the spread of viruses. Of course, we don't know what we're going to have with COVID, but there's less air circulation from room to room. And greater reliability through redundancy, and you have less downtime than other kinds of air conditioning. and easily controlled. So anyway, those are three technologies that I would hope that we would take serious looks at and to incorporate in our new construction. I brought this up several years ago under previous administration, and they looked at it and they said, well, it'd be hard to incorporate in existing facilities, but when we build new buildings, then we think this is something that we could use. So I would highly urge you to take a look at those things and see if we could use them, because I have a vision that TCC could become the most advanced technology oriented community college in the country. To me, this would be similar to what the Houston Community College is doing with that Exxon or that oil service facility that they built to service the oil industry, and it's state of the art. It's everything that those industries need in a facility, and it's on a community college campus. So, yeah, it's reaching out a little bit, but on the other hand, I think we could be leading the way, and I would hope that we would do that.
So I will share. I apologize. Go ahead.
Well,
go ahead, Ken.
I would just add to what Mr. Heed has just said. I think the insulated concrete form approach and the power over Ethernet approach are both worth investigation and consideration. And the part that concerns me, I don't know anything about the third item he mentioned. The part that concerns me is it's very easy for people in the construction business who are not familiar with it to just say, no, bad idea. I think both of these have merit to them and warrant further investigation. Thank you.
The one thing I'll add is that we've been having our initial meetings with Jacobs to get them up to speed as our owner's rep, and they're very familiar with these technologies as well. So we've been having that conversation with them because obviously they represent our interests in dealing with the design and construction teams. And so we'll get you some additional feedback on how that fits into this conversation.
That's encouraging.
Yeah, Fort Worth and Tarrant County are trying to be, known as more of a technology center. And this would certainly add to that process. I would think. I think it would be in our community's best interest. Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
Mr. President, excuse me. This is Gwen Morrison.
Yes,
may I add a comment? So this is this year we're celebrating the 30th anniversary of ADA, American with Disabilities Act, and I would like to ask that as we are preparing to spend the $825 million that our community approved for us, that one of the small things that make a big difference in the lives of people is that we look at gender neutral or family friendly or caregiver-friendly restroom facilities in all of our buildings. I noticed that when I was at a meeting at Trinity River, we signed an MOU agreement with someone that existed in that facility. And I would like to see us be proactive in this program, making sure those kind of facilities are present in all of our buildings. And what that means is a disabled person that needs a care attendant with them can do that without infringing on a male restroom, one that's designated male or female, and that's a multiple stall restroom. So I would ask that we look at that.
In our design work.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Mr. Heed, this is Teresa. I do have a comment. Thank you so much for all this information that you've given to us, Ms. Alanis. I would like to echo what Mr. Heed mentioned and also Mr. Barr. I've seen some of this technology that's out there. I think it would be very favorable for our students. I think it would be something that would set us and elevate our college to just a whole different level. And I too would like to find out a little bit more information about what we're doing to explore that and what the possibilities are. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? We'll move on to item 5M, consideration and approval of contracts with multiple vendors for the emergency power upgrades at Southeast Campus in the amount of $679,165.68.
Yes. So again, part of our MEP program with the bond program, continuation of that work.
Questions, comments? There being none, we'll move to item 5N, consideration and approval of contract with Perkins & Will to provide redevelopment design services for Southeast Campus in the amount of $2,621,940.
Yeah, so Perkins & Will was selected as the design team for the Southeast expansion. And we had an initial agreement with them for preliminary design services. And this is the next iteration of that to do schematic design and design development as we get further into an assessment of the needs and starting to develop a program.
Okay, I think our same concerns with item L apply here as well. So if we could try to incorporate those new technologies in this facility as well would be well received. Any questions, discussion? Item 5O, consideration and approval of contract with Freedom Construction for district-wide electronic access control repairs in the amount of $253,134.94.
Yeah, so you may recall that last month we awarded a contract for software associated with our electronic building access where it exists in our district. And this is the construction and electrical work necessary to prepare for that installation. We've got some aged control units and that kind of thing that need to be replaced.
Questions, comments? There being none, we'll move to 5P, to authorize the transfer of $12,656,941 from the Operations and Maintenance Fund 10 to Debt Service Fund 50, parentheses, $2,982,189, parentheses, and Cash Funded Capital Fund 40, parentheses, $9,674,752, parentheses, for the purpose of supporting the 5-year capital plan.
Yeah, so last year with the adoption of the budget, the district had the capacity to set aside $12.6 million for what we labeled at the time as future capital. We knew we were going to be preparing for the issuance of debt and some other cash-funded plans to extend over a 5-year period. So what this does is it transfers those funds for two purposes. One is to establish a 2-month fund balance for the debt service fund, like we talked about earlier, consistent with the policy. And then the remainder of it, the $9.6 million, will go into our cash-funded capital fund program to support capital investments. And so it carries out that objective.
Questions, discussion? There being none, we'll move to 5P. Consideration and approval of resolution approving the operating budgets and capital budgets of the TCCD for the fiscal year beginning September 1, 2020. And I think we're going to have a presentation on that.
That's correct.
Later. Do we need to cover it now, or should we?
No, this just formalizes the action that you take annually, and the Chancellor will cover it in a briefing in a moment. Okay,
and I think the same applies for item R, which is consideration and approval of a resolution providing for the levy and collection of an annual ad valorem tax on all property within the boundaries of TCCD.
That's correct.
I think we've concluded that part. Item 6 is report of the Chancellor. Is there anything that you would like to cover, Chancellor? I know there is.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Mr. Heed. I'd first like to draw your attention to both 6A and 6B, and those are the scheduled upcoming facility and IT projects. These are the projects out from a 90-day projection. And if you have any questions on those, we'd be happy to answer those. Again, this is practice to give you a heads up of what's coming down the road here. So there's no questions today. Certainly, we have plenty of time to address them as they come up over the coming month. I would then like to move to 6C, which is a presentation of the 2021 budget and tax levy. And that was mentioned just a little earlier as it relates to an action item. And so as we begin this, the 2021 budget, the framework in which we've used to present this budget to you today for your adoption next week is mostly a flat budget for this coming year. And it builds on a few assumptions, one of which is a 10% decline in enrollment. And it appears that property tax increase will offset this decline. Another framework is that even though these factors that we're dealing with, we're still able to meet our priorities and preserve the continuity of learning and providing support services to students, as well as to ensure our debt service obligations. And as we go through this, you'll see how this framework comes to life. I want to make a mention that there are not raises that are under consideration in this budget. There is quite a bit of perhaps uncertainty as it relates to revenue this year, and that enrollment decline of 10%. Currently, we're about 17% down, and that's for this semester. The 10% decline is really proposed an assumption for the entire year. So we're not yet started the fall semester, so we don't know exactly where we'll be. We don't know where we'll be in the spring semester. So there's quite a bit of uncertainty there. In addition to, given the times, there's a little uncertainty as to what the tax collection rate may look like. And we would have a better indication as the year goes by. And although the state has currently held us harmless in this environment related to budget, there is past practice, there's precedent there where the state has come in difficult times and ask for some form of a give back. So given all of those, our three main revenue sources was somewhat certain, certainly a lot less certainty than we've had in other years. I just want to put on the radar that in January, when our revenue position might be maybe more certain, we may come back and ask the board to amend the budget. So these are the bullets, if you will, framework in which we've developed this budget. Our resources of revenue, again, continue to be state aid. This is the second year of the biennium of $56.8 million. And again, we have not been asked to plan on foregoing any of that to this date, and I hope that does not come, but that certainly is a possibility. You can see how that breaks down to the 56.8. And again, this is the second year of the biennium. The state funding, the percentage of state funding that we receive as it relates to our total budget, next slide, will indicate over time that the state's share of our budget has continued to decrease, primarily because our property tax portion has increased generously in recent years. This year, with everything being quite flat, we anticipate that state funding will be about 15% of our budget. One of our other main funding tuition, we are now in the third year of our commitment to the tuition rates that you see before you. We have no intention of modifying that or change of that. 3 years will be up this year, and so next year for the budget 22, we can entertain what those rates may be. So that's not changing. Next slide really speaks to a very big picture, and it related to the ad valorem tax and where the generation of that comes from. And this is big picture, specifically, as you can see in red, total valuations in the county are over $215 billion. And what is really significant right now, given the time, certainly, is that $15 million number that you see there. And you could say that's a number of dispute, if you will. So a large portion of the 215 million, 15 billion is a big number as it relates to the tax and tax rate. So there's a significantly more value still pending before the Appraisal Revenue Review Board than is really typical. So and you can see over the years in 17 over to 20, it's been in the $9 million, $5 million, $8 million range, and we're in $15 billion this year. So the current growth then is only anticipated to be around 2.5%. In previous years, we were around the 10% as a county. So that's important to acknowledge. Specifically to us, what does this mean as it relates to what we're putting forward in the budget? The adopted budget of last year called for 13.017 cents per $100 evaluation. This budget calls for the same. The difference is how we are accounting for it and have to account for it. So the proposed O&M budget is less, if you will, at 12 cents, 12.147 cents than the effective rate. Effective rate is now referred to as the no new revenue tax rate. I don't know why the nomenclature has changed, but it has changed. So we no longer use the phrase effective tax rate. That's the no new revenue tax rate, and we are under that. So the interest in sinking, which is new and different, it's what we statutorily have to do to raise sufficient funds for our annual debt service, is 87 cents of the tax rate proposed, and you can see overall we remain flat at 13.017 cents per 100. And again, that was a commitment we made to the voters related to our bond elections, because made mention earlier related to how the dollars from transfer standpoint, how we have budgeted that in the past work. And I'll get into a little bit more of that as we move through this presentation. So as we look at the ad valorem tax revenue in particular, the next slide, from a history, you can see what that has looked like. And so as we look at this year, the significant difference is just that we have carved out, as we have to, the interest in sinking fund. And so that accounts for about $17 million, a little over $17 million of our overall tax revenue from ad valorem. So as you can see, as we carve that out, and then overall for the entire year, the change is about $3 million from previous years, where you can see other years, the percentages and the dollar amounts were much greater. There's a few things impacting that. We are assuming a 96% collection rate estimate for the tax, and after we deduct the TERS, and that is lower. So than previous years where we were around 99%. Given the times where we're at, we want to be conservative in that way. So that reflects the 96% collection rate. So the combined M&O and INS revenue for 2021 is about $3.9 million more than it was in 20. So that's a very modest growth projection. Sorry, I just lost my screen. Very modest growth projection. And also want to draw to its lowered, the lower tax rate of the last 2 years, we did not actually capture the valuation. That was
10-11%. We only captured about half of that, so we kept the tax rate down in previous years as well. In both 19, we're showing 5.48, in 20, 6.02. When those increases were actually 10-11%, we did not capture all of that, being good stewards, if you will. So moving on to the next slide, the total operations, Fund 10 that is how that would look at this year. And there's a few things that really we are adjusting based upon our framework, our assumptions, and how we are accounting for things, if you will. And so the couple big items here, as you can see, is that, again, state operations stay the same. The operations and maintenance tax increases, and that's the increase of the property valuation of $12 million. We are anticipating, again, a 10% decrease in enrollment. So that's reflected in the three items you see under tuition for both credit and non-credit.
Interest and other income stays the same. That designated reserve that we had is $5 million. That, in essence, was really not revenue. That was really an expenditure that we have set aside, if you will. So we're not going to account for that as we had in the past. And then the big change in terms of how we are accounting for things is really moving the old revenue and replacement. And you just heard mention of that by Susan in terms of the transfer that we're going to ask you to make. Of that $27 million that we've always budgeted in R&R, and take that, really remove that from Fund 10 and account for it more appropriately under projects that you'll see in a minute. So it looks like a big change of $26.5 million, but in essence, it really is how we're accounting for what that Fund 10, the resources out of Fund 10 that have always come and the revenue that's always come from those funding sources. So next slide, please. Given all of that, we are still able to do new things. And we are very fortunate to plan well, I think. And we're a large organization. We have a lot of opportunities, flexible. And therefore, I want to draw attention to some of the new items on the that will be funded. Some of you have seen already as it relates to some of construction. But our new heavy equipment program will be coming on board. We have invested more in our life sciences programs, as well as some of our healthcare programs in MRI and nuclear medicine as well. So both from personnel and equipment standpoint, we are doing new and better things in growing our offerings, if you will. Some of the other things related to equipment is the entourage table. I think you've seen those, and they're quite fascinating, a great learning environment for students. The automotive diesel program, beginning both with personnel and equipment, the new ophthalmology technician program, and then we also have advances made in machining and equipment in the automated manufacturing technology program. If you recall, last year we did not budget for the refresh of our 5-year replacement of our equipment, and we're going to reinstitute that. We wanted a year of planning to really know exactly where we're going as it relates to devices and cloud and otherwise. And so we will be reinstituting that this coming year. So from a proposed then expenditure fund, how things would look, very simple, that as we shift the penny from under a penny, the 8.7 cents over to capital. The maintenance and operations fund, again, the change looks quite significant, but in essence, it isn't as it relates to some of the budget transfers that we've done. So the proposal would be $371 million there. The auxiliary fund, Fund 20, that increase reflects the Stay the Course partnership with Catholic Charities, which is about a $1.1 million a year commitment that we have yet for another 3 years, as well as an increase in the digital course material expenses that we have for students. And so as you look at the auxiliary fund, Fund 20, in all that consumes about $2 million of fund balance for these programs. But the fund balance in Fund 20 is around $20 million, and so quite sustainable for the near term horizon, and certainly as that fund balance would grow with other revenue sources. The cash fund capital, Fund 20, and you can see the difference there as a reflection of transfer of the $27 million that we had from Fund 1 as well, or from Fund 10, as well as the $23 million that we had in a fund balance of the building fund. So if you want to look at where that $50 million comes from in the cash funded capital Fund 40, it's really a reflection of the transfer of the $27 million from Fund 10, as well as the balance in Fund 70 and Xing out that account, if you will. That is a large number, that $50 million. What can you actually cash fund for a year? And this is large really due to the finish out that we'll have at Trinity River when we consolidate the MOC offices and other administrative functions in the district. And Susan will cover more of that in detail with the capital plan overview that she will have. We did sell bonds, 300 million of them. It was go back to that slide. Don't move on yet. it was a sale a month or so ago. It was a 1.7% interest rate, from what I'm told, one of the lowest, if not the lowest, documented in the state. We did receive a check a couple days ago for $300 million. So the bond fund program planned this year. We did cash fund, if you will, bond projects on our own dime of $40 million. And this year we're proposing to be able to do $136 million worth of work. And that is quite ambitious as well. And then again, the last item in the proposed expenditures is that interest sinking fund. And that is a fund 50, that debt service fund that we began to seed last year with about $12 million reserved, $12 million budgeted, and then moving the $5 million that I mentioned earlier out of that contingency that really wasn't. We have satisfied our revenue need for that fund, and therefore that expenditure of $17 million is able to be covered. So the actual action items that we will ask you for next week include adopting budgets for the 5 funds, setting the credit tuition rate or continuing to endorse that, providing me the authority to set non-credit tuition and fees, and they would be ratified again as you will next week, as well as authorization to individual salaries and sign employment contract. The other main resolution will speak to the local tax exemptions and the designation of the tax collector assessor that we talked a little bit about a second ago. So at the conclusion of today's meeting, we will send you all these slides that you see before you today, presentation. And so that may prompt some questions, but certainly Susan and I are open to addressing any of your questions right.
I have a comment, Chancellor, and that is one of the reasons that our state appropriations has remained the same. We're exempt from the 5% reduction that they've asked the 4-year colleges to give back, is because bipartisanly they have recognized that we are part of the solution of unemployment, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if you want to comment on that, but that's certainly a good thing.
Yeah, and that's true today. Very true today, and it's recognized at the state level that in fact a way our particular situation is certainly going to be the role of community colleges, and that we're local and everything's, all this situation impacts people locally. And I can go into, the types of jobs that are out there and the things that we do more so than any other education sector that does really speaks to that. And so I think that is well understood. Funny or ironically as well, some folks in Austin don't see community colleges and higher education. When they talked about a higher education cut, we weren't on the radar for some folks. So I guess that was a good thing. But Mr. Heed, you're correct. There's a certain feeling within the folks in Austin that community colleges are very vital to the recovery. And I'm on calls, and Reg is on calls weekly with our parts across the state, and that continues to be the theme.
Okay, and I heard our success points were 10% of our budget. Has that been raised to 12% now?
No.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments anyone has? Again, you will receive these slides and have a week to chew on.
Mr. President, may I make a comment? This is Gwen Morrison.
Certainly.
Well, I want to say, Chancellor, it's great to see you. And thank you. I want to thank you and all of your staff for the great work that you obviously have been doing during this very difficult time. And I also want to say a special thanks for the way that you have not only taken care of continuing the work, but of ensuring the comfort or continuation of our employees, taking care of all of our employees and encouraging them to be empowered to do their work in this transitional period. And in that same vein, I understand the presentation points that you have made on the budget. And I just would like to encourage you to make a couple of more statements to bring some comfort to employees, because this will be the first time in quite a while that we have not given some type of raise or increase. And I didn't hear you mention any change that the state is making in insurance. I would hope that they're not raising that factor of cost, and that if they raise that, they'll send us the money to cover it. But I know that there's going to be some concern among some employees about the fact that we are not offering any kind of raise. And so I think that merits a comment from you to them that puts their mind at ease that what we're focused on here is being able to continue. I won't say full employment, but for lack of a better term, I'll say that, and full services, more importantly, to continue to address all of the needs that we see in our county right now, and that all the people in the county and in the area have, because we are not only a leader in higher ed, in education, period, in the county, but in the region and in the state. So I would just ask you to make an extra effort to show a little outreach and empathy to our employees, since you get to speak to them and we don't really get to speak to them, that we're concerned for them and their families. We appreciate their work and their dedication to the district. We're looking forward to better days ahead, but in the meantime, I guess we're asking everybody to hunker down and make it on the salaries that we have right now. I just think that would be, if I were your employee right now, even though you told me I wasn't going to get a raise, I would like for you to tell me that you're concerned about it and you know that I might be disappointed. But thank you, Chancellor, for your work.
Thank you, Dr. Morrison. I do want to reflect back to March when we began, this most recent journey, and we talked about two things, and that was, one, the safety and security of our employees. Two was the continued operation of learning and student service for our students in our community. And so we've tried to hold true to those in this budget, certainly. The other factor, as I mentioned, some uncertainty around revenue and what that might be, and that's why I did want to put on the table the potential for an amended budget during the calendar year. That's not something, or during the fiscal year. That's not something I'm saying we're going to do, but because of a lot of the unknowns and the circumstances that we're in, that may be something that we may want to entertain down the road. But I do appreciate your comments related to the employee.
Chancellor, I have a question. You mentioned revenue and the question mark surrounding that. We are looking at a collection rate less, 96% versus 99%, for that same reason. Do you have any idea, even though the taxable property only went up 2.53%, which is a whole lot less than previous years, but the evaluations were done as of January 1st or December 31st, and do we anticipate a great number of protests because people are viewing property being worth less now due to COVID than it was on January 1st? And are we making any allowances for that? Have you heard anything from the appraisal district or whatever regarding that income?
So again, we do have a lower collection rate because of that. There's still $15 billion worth of property that is in dispute, if you will. And so, Susan, I don't know if you can speak a little bit more specific.
Yeah, so So what I would say is, in theory, they are obligated to have valued it in January, even though they're considering those protests now. I don't know that we've got a lot of clarity about how the appraisal district is approaching that issue. I will say that a lot of the large organizations are starting to plan for reductions in value in next year and perhaps the year after that. And so that's one of the things that we'll be preparing for, is if we end up having reduced valuation, which we're not used to in this environment, that happened back in 2008. So, or 2000, well, it was a lag. So probably by 2010 is when we were seeing those impacts. So, I say that I don't know how the protests will turn out. However, we are planning for a conservative collection rate that could also be reflective of a reduced valuations for that remaining protested amount.
Yeah, and thank you, Susan, for referencing the upcoming year. I've had conversation with both my counterparts at the school city, and both had mentioned that related to next year probably being more of a concern along those.
Thank you.
Situations.
May I make another comment, Mr. President?
Certainly.
I will say that, Chancellor, I was very glad to see that, not like other entities, some of which have pronounced their shortfalls this year and are looking at cuts. You did not mention any cuts, and I'm hoping that we won't have to do that. I know that in the course of your management efforts, you keep a close look on the vacancies that come up and that are out there. And I just want to encourage us to power through, to hire people that we need to hire, as we need to do the very best that we can for our community, and to encourage our employees, to let them know how valued they are, and to encourage them to do their very best work. So I think that those things are keenly important. And I just want to thank you for what you have done and encourage you to do more. And it's okay to become known as the employee's chancellor. I don't think the board would take objection to that, because our employees are such a valuable asset. And since you're the board's only employee, I think the board would greatly agree with my statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen. And I would add to that, because you always talk about our students, and Chancellor, you might comment on that. Our Supporting Students and Eliminating Barriers Fund has been used extensively to help our students, because as Gwen has said in the past, they rely on jobs and second jobs, and a lot of those have gone away. So without the Eliminate Barriers Fund, they would really be hurting. And I'd appreciate your comment on that.
Well, certainly both the Barriers Fund and the CARES Act help tremendously, related to put resources directly in hands. We will continue with that. We process now of assessing, what's left where, and how we had certain restrictions or requirements that we had to meet, and now how we can continue with the same effort of directly supporting students with the institutional CARES dollars. We also continue to have our devices, our computer, our technology, our internet access services available for students. Quite a bit left there. Certainly that'll get tapped as the semester comes on. And, as of yesterday, talking with folks from AACC, American Association of Community Colleges, related to this, I think there's going to be a lot more aggressive effort nationally to ensure that the community college sector gets more of the head in the first go around. Community colleges make up about half of the number of students enrolled in all higher education. The share that the sector received out of all the stimulus funds was 23%. And mostly because the formula is driven upon full-time equivalent students, and the universities, by their nature, have more full-time equivalent students than the community colleges. However, we have just as many or more students than they serve. And so the discussion yesterday was just that that in this next go around or two, we need to be much more as a sector aggressive with our lobbying related to that particular issue. We serve more people, and by us receiving a slice of the pie that is much less than the total number of students we receive doesn't do well for communities and individuals in those communities.
So, Mr. President, speaking of students, let me just thank the Chancellor for extending the registration deadline for the fall semester. And I'm hoping, I know that staff has made a concerted effort to communicate that across the community. And I am so glad that there's still time for people to enroll and register for classes at TCC for any number of different semesters, beginning with the 16-week fall semester. You know, traditionally, families put their children first in terms of registering them for school. And once they get them settled, then they think about the adults or the out-of-school people going back to college. And so this year, with all the uncertainty, it has certainly been important that the college recognized and made an effort to extend registration and to make services available to those considering college, to encourage them, to incentivize them to go ahead and sign up and take college classes as a way of powering through this challenging time. So that's another kudos to you and your staff, Chancellor.
Thank you.
Chancellor, are there any further updates?
Well, we'll have something a little bit down a little bit further, but if there aren't any other budget or tax levy questions, I'd ask Susan to begin a 5-year capital plan review.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about capital investments today, and obviously you guys are aware that that's one of our big financial responsibilities, not only to ensure that we're building facilities that meet the needs of our students, but that we're also protecting our financial investment by taking care of the facilities that we have. And so we're in a fortunate position of being able to have the bond program to allow us to do more effective planning around that. And even in the uncertain times right now, it may be the best time to continue on with our program. It's good for the economy for us to be making the investment. You heard about the interest rate we received, which is great in terms of our tax dollar, and then also our ability to hopefully get good contracting prices as we move through the program. So you have not seen this before, but we are introducing a 5-year capital plan, which the intent is for this to be a bit of a journey. And you'll see we're on the first step, and we've got a lot more work to do over time to make this a useful tool for staff as well as for you to know what's on the horizon. Next slide, please. So as you know, in preparation for the bond program, there was a tremendous amount of work that was done to get stakeholder input and to make some provide some guidance to the projects that would be included in the bond program. And but we also at that time began working to integrate the debt and cash funded projects into a singular consolidated plan for clarity. And our intent is to organize our priorities regardless of which funding source they come from, sequence those projects to ensure that we're spending dollars effectively, and then also long term is to communicate with the college community, whether that's the taxpayers who are funding it, the students who are anticipating the improvement, our employees who are interested in seeing the transformation of our campuses. And so that is the longer term goal. And again, you'll see sort of the first step. Earlier this year, as we've talked about a lot, we've had a realignment of funds. It's fairly confusing this year with all the movement we've done. Next year, it should be a lot easier because we've set the foundation for how we'll structure this. But of course, we've got operations and maintenance, and that is we do take care of our facilities to some degree there with routine carpet repairs and painting and things like that. We also do planning and studies out of there is what we've established for next year. And for cash funded capital, again, that's supported by the annual transfer from Fund 10. And in principle, although this is not a clean line, it's generally for projects that may not extend the useful life of an asset. So it may be more significant repairs like the renovations of basic classrooms, but not the big projects that you'll see in the bond program. But it can also include some of the projects that are not accommodated in the bond program that as we evolve over time. The bond program fund obviously holds our debt proceeds, so that $300 million that we received just last week. And we established the 4 buckets associated with the bond program there. And then finally, the debt service fund, where we will receipt our INS tax levy and then pay our debt service out of. So that's basically the structure that supports our bond program. Next slide. Our capital program, I should say. So to give you a bit of a framework, our intent is to have this 5-year capital plan as the overarching plan. It evolves every year. It's updated continually. It's a living document. The first year, perhaps the second of each iteration of it, will inform us on what our annual budget needs to be for that. And that's the part you take action on. That's what you would actually vote on, is that annual budget appropriation. And then, of course, under that, we'll have a lot of details associated with the individual projects that are reflected under that. But it gives you a sense of sort of the hierarchy of the effort. Next slide. So what we've done so far is we went through a great deal of effort, and I have to thank the staff and real estate and facilities, Gary and Harry Britton, and a number of other people who've worked extensively on identifying all the known projects. Margaret Lutton has a deep knowledge of our college and all of its assets, and so that was certainly a role for her in that. We've identified the scope as we know it and the preliminary pricing that we have. Again, for the earlier projects, we've got more definitiveness around that than the others. For the bond program, we're projecting for escalation based on inflation, as well as contingency to plan for that as it evolves over time. We've also spent a great deal of time refining the schedule for the Northwest Campus redevelopment over a 5-year period, and work in collaboration with our design team as well as Skanska. Now that we have Jacobs on board, they're going to help us refine that even further as we go forward. You may recall that we appropriated $40 million this year to be able to capture the reimbursement for bond program projects that we're already starting. And so we've moved all of those into a consolidated fund so we can see it over time. And then we've also developed a detailed plan for renovation of specific classrooms. So for the first time, we have sort of a 5-year look at 50 classrooms a year on each campus and which ones are intended to be touched. And part of that is planning for how that effort fits into some of the Northwest and Southeast project programs that have obviously a deeper touch into all the facilities. Next slide. So again, I've alluded to it, but we've got a lot of work to do. We're going to be validating construction schedules and cash flows and so on. As we've talked about already today, we're going to continue to work with the champions to develop and prioritize our capital investments. And so in some instances, that's establishing the criteria for design, like we talked about with with student experience a moment ago. And in others, our principal bucket is the area that we plan to spend the next year really refining the contents of that. That's going to be where there's a deeper touch on the campuses that are not getting the full redevelopment, but we'll be planning and prioritizing projects associated with that. We will be migrating all of our documents into a tool that allows us to automate that tracking and reporting. It integrates with our financial system, so there's one number of the truth about how much we've spent and so on. So it's setting that framework. We are also aligning our total planned expenditures to match the anticipated results. And you'll see in a moment that that our dreams exceed our resources, and that's not unusual for an organization like ours or at this phase of the planning. So can't emphasize enough that this is a living document that will evolve over time. Next slide. So this is just a bit of a summary that we've been projecting over time, and I'll have you focus first on that middle line, which is the bond program. And currently, if you follow it all the way out to the total, which includes the current year, because we've got to track it in its entirety, that it exceeds $825 million. As I mentioned, we will be fine tuning that to figure out what we ought to supplement with cash. You can see that 22 through 25, we don't have as much cash as we would anticipate potentially being the annual transfer from Fund 10. And so we will be solving that riddle with future iterations of this as we work with all of the stakeholders. I'll also mention that part of the reason we don't have a full $27 million transfer anticipated in each of the subsequent years on our cash funded program is because we also know that we're going to have to anticipate future tranches of debt as well and how we'll absorb that debt service. And so it's a matter of sort of reconciling all of those things. But this gives you a sense of what our preliminary projections show cash flow over time. I think it's probably a little bit ambitious. Your cash flow usually doesn't, even when you're on schedule, your cash flow doesn't normally stay at the pace that you think it might on the front end. And so we're good in shape, but I wanted to give you a sense of the work that's gone into this so far. Next slide. So our cash funded capital fund, which is Fund 40, and we've talked about this already, has a total budget of $50.7 million. And it includes the annual transfer of $27 million, plus the use of fund balance of 13.1 that was already planned with that consolidation of funds previously, as well as the $9.6 million that you'll be transferring with the action that you take next week with our with that $12 million set aside that we had in the current year. And so that takes us to the whole total budget that correlates with projects that have been identified for next year. Next slide. So I'll tell you the graphic on the right, it's not intended for you to read, obviously, but it is actually a snapshot of the document that we have so far. It's not a great publication for all forms of consumers yet, but it tells you that we've got hundreds of lines of detail on the projects that are planned and how they are tentatively scheduled over the next 5-year period. This again was the effort of capturing all of what we know is potentially on the horizon that we need to start planning for. And as we fine tune this document in the coming year, we will make it publishable for a wider audience. But I wanted to share with you some of the significant cash funded projects for next year. And we've talked about a lot of them, and several of them are action items for next week, including the first 3. Excuse me, that's not correct. The Trinity River renovation you've already acted on with the move of the administrative staff. Bullets 2 and 3 are related to projects that you'll be approving next week. Plus, we've got some relocations of avionics up at the Irma Hadley Johnson facility, some maintenance kinds of things that need to happen, including our normal plan for district-wide furniture and carpet replacements and roof replacements. We're trying to get those on a more explicit schedule that are planned district-wide based on need. And so RE&F will be managing those funds to plan for how that looks over time. We also do reserve a couple of $1 million in contingency for projects and issues that come up throughout the year with as many buildings as we own to be available for things that come up. Next slide. So then moving on to the bond funded capital, as we already pointed out, it's just essentially a use of bond proceeds of $136 million. Again, that's sort of the outer boundary, I think, of what our cash flow needs might be next year. I suspect that number may come down, but as we fine tune the work with Jacobs and our consultants on the big projects that will happen next year, then we'll revise that in subsequent years. Next slide. And again, some of the key bond funded projects for this year, again, we've got this very detailed breakout of the individual projects planned, but we've got big things happening at Northwest as part of their redevelopment. We're doing, as part of that classroom renovation, the ones that are the full treatment of technology and meeting all of that 21st century attributes for classroom spaces. The more heavily used ones are included here. The corporate solutions renovation on the 3rd floor of the Seattle building, the welding lab that we've already talked about, and so on, the design work that's happening, as well as the MEP program that's well underway at this point. Next slide. So the next steps are that you'll be obviously adopting the budget associated with the first year of this next week. We're going to continue to refine the principal projects list and work with the owner's rep to package this and validate our assumptions at this point. And again, the goal is to develop a publication format that we can make available to a wider audience. And it is in partnership with our owners rep, going to include a website for our external stakeholders, particularly focused on the bond program, and that'll serve a couple of purposes. It'll allow people to stay informed about what they'll be seeing as dirt turns on campuses, but then also allow contractors and so on to be aware of upcoming opportunities for contracting. So anyway, a lot of work left to do, but we think that this is good progress for the board to be engaged in, as well as the organization as a whole. After this presentation, we'll be going very quickly over the bond program. What I would anticipate is those future quarterly updates that we had been calling the bond program updates, they'll end up being a capital plan update, because people are probably less concerned about the funding source versus what they actually see happening on the campuses. And of course, we're keeping track of which source they're coming from, but you'll see that over time as we come back to you every 3 months. But with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Susan, if I heard correctly, you commented that if we couldn't pay the additional funding for those projects through cash flow, that we would consider other financing sources?
So, I think it's going to be a balancing act of establishing priorities. Mm-hmm. And deciding if there's something that merits a different funding source. I think we are well resourced between the cash funding that we anticipate going forward and the bond program resources. And now it's our responsibility just to make sure that we've prioritized and value engineered and spent the money effectively. So that'll just be how we put those puzzle pieces together over the coming years.
And as obviously there's some benefits in doing things today as opposed to waiting 5 years when you have the money.
That's right.
Yep. The other thing, minor question, but when we reskin those buildings, is there any thought to adding additional insulation? I don't know if that's a possibility, but since you're taking I know that in a residential construction, there is some insulation that goes on before you put the brick facade.
Yeah, so every conversation we've had with the design team and the construction team has been about future operating expenses and so on, which would include things like preparing for energy costs. I don't know the specific answer to that question, but we'll certainly go pose it to them and get an answer to you.
Okay. Because I would imagine we would have had much less insulation back when those buildings were first built.
Well, especially with the bricks falling off, that would tell you that, right. that we've got some room for improvement that we're excited about.
And we can exchange the cost of the scaffolding to additional things.
Indeed. I can't wait to get rid of the scaffolding.
It's time. Teresa?
Yes, sir. I thank you. Yes, I had just a very quick question. I'm very excited to know that we're going to have some sort of website that will reflect the status of the projects and things like that. What I wanted to ask is there going to be something similar like a dashboard that would kind of, is that what we're envisioning, is a dashboard to kind of see how things are going financially, to see actual numbers and things like that?
Yeah, we actually had a long discussion with Jacobs last week, and they've shown us some examples of what they've done for other organizations, and we'll just have to make some decisions about frequency of updating and the level of detail that we include there to make sure it's useful to the users.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that.
And Mr. President, may I make a comment?
Certainly.
Susan, as you have that discussion, would you think about how you will train the board members, especially me, so that we can make maximum use of the information that's provided?
Indeed. Yes.
Thank you.
If there's no other questions on the 5-year capital plan, Susan, did you get highlights of the 2019 bond program update?
So again, this is our quarterly status. It'll morph into a quarterly status on the capital program. And you've seen some pieces of this before. Next slide. But our intent is to provide an update and then just also to prepare you for the action items that are on the August agenda, which we've already discussed at length related to the next steps with Northwest and Southeast. So this is just a reminder of the buildings that are being renovated versus the buildings that'll be new on the Northwest campus. That's obviously where we've made the most significant progress at this point. And again, still working with the principals as we go through that design work. Next slide. And this is an aerial photograph, just or exhibit to remind you of what that campus will look like. Obviously, a number of buildings that are coming down in the middle that offer a real opportunity for improvement. And then I'm going to run through some slides. We're starting to see renderings from our design team that that capture the look and feel of the proposed first buildings that are under design. They're starting to refine the designs a lot more. We will be working with Campus Character and Quality, that principal panel led by Reg Gates, and they've had the opportunity to see a lot of this work already to help us get the feedback. And what's interesting here is just the learning stair that becomes an opportunity for, we talked about those sticky spaces earlier. So the intent is to incorporate a lot of light, a lot of wellness, a lot of opportunities for interaction and visibility into the work that's going on the campuses. Next slide. Some of the external treatments that you see, so it can activate the inside and the outside together. Next slide. Another learning stair per se to be able to use or potentially even as learning spaces. Next slide. Lots of greenery, as you can see. Next slide.
Susan, a quick question on the learning stairs. Will there be any allowance for handicapped students?
So that is definitely, we will have ADA allowances to make sure that they accommodate anyone who needs to use those. I mean, you're right that there have been criticisms in some of the older buildings that have had similar concepts in terms of accessibility, but that is alive and well as a topic to make sure that we're inclusive with those facilities.
Okay.
Susan, this is Gwen Morrison. Could you make sure that you all go out to that campus and spend some time out there between 3 and 6 in the afternoon when that western sun is glaring?
Agreed. So, the design team has done extensive work to look at the sun patterns and so on to make good decisions about where windows are placed and what treatments are out there. And you're right. There are certain times of year that the outdoor space is not going to be accessible to, like today for most of us, but certainly they are planning for those weather conditions that we'll be operating in. Okay, next slide. And next slide. And so this just shows you an aerial view that I thought was lovely in terms of what the vision is long term when all the buildings are built over time. Okay, and the next slide. So moving on to the Southeast campus, we aren't quite as far along on this, but we obviously have been working with the architects for the preliminary design. You'll be giving us the next iteration of that contract to continue that work. We anticipate that at late fall, we'll be looking to issue the RFP for a construction manager at risk to get them on board. We need to solidify our arrangements with Jacobs between now and then to have them help us through that process. Next slide. So in terms of infrastructure, there's still ongoing stuff that most of us can't see. It's behind the scenes and not as exciting as the pictures I just showed you, but lots of infrastructure projects that are ongoing, and then a number that are commencing in 2021. So next slide. And then again, the principal projects that are underway, the welding labs, we've had the active learning academies completed. We've done 34 formal learning environments, which is pretty exciting. We're starting to prepare for district wayfinding and signage to help us use building attributes, but also start to plan for how people will find their way around and navigate our campuses. And again, continuing to work with the principals to fine tune our project list on this front. Next slide. So as far as, and I've alluded to some of the meetings with Jacobs, you authorized the sprint start with them. We'll come back to you with a fuller contract in the fall once we've agreed on what role they'll play based on the phase of development that we're at. We've had some great meetings. They were very organized in terms of A, getting up to speed, and then B, helping us organize how we will interact. And so those meetings are going well, and our hope is to come back in October with a fuller explanation of that longer term contract. Next slide. And again, we've continued, Andre and his team have continued to have outreach events. You know, it's kind of a weird environment for that right now, but we are having the discussion about the vendor portal too, to make sure that those projects are accessible and well-known in the contracting community. And then the other good news is with the GMP contract number 1, I mentioned this earlier, that we're asking you to approve next week. They have achieved 30.6%, and they've gone all the way through subcontracting, where they've actually bid out the work. And so that's a pretty solid number, just unless they end up having any challenges with particular contractors. But anyway, I'm excited about having achieved that for this phase. Next slide. And we've talked about it. We closed last week on our debt sale, and got good news in terms of what our annual debt service cost is. We had preliminarily been planning for up to $20 million a year, and so that's good news that our true interest cost came in so low. So with that, next slide. And then again, you've got a number of action items on the agenda next week that we've already covered that are functions of the bond program. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. President, can I make a comment?
Certainly.
I find all this exciting, and I think it's going to really enhance the district's ability to serve our students. And I like the way you all are going about planning this. One thing I'm concerned about, we're spending a lot of money, and I really hope we will focus on spending that money to the degree we can with local firms. And I can tell you that the quick response from the lawyers and other people is, well, we can't discriminate and all that. Other governmental entities are finding ways to spend their money with people locally. Those are the people that pay our taxes. Their employees are here, they live here, they plow their money back in the community. I would like to ask that some investigation be made about how we focus on using local vendors. And I think there'll be some pushback on that. But if we look into how other governmental entities are accomplishing this, we'll find there are ways to do it. And I'm not asking us to break any rules or laws, but this needs to, just like with minority contracting, if we focus on it, we'll figure out a way to be more successful with it. So I would like to ask Chancellor, if you all would look into that. I think it is something that would be very important to Tarrant County.
We have mentioned that many times in the past, and I'll echo that opinion. There's a lot of talk out in the community that we should be doing more locally, whether it's real or imagined, but that sentiment is out there. That's where we get our money. We ought to be spending it locally as best we can.
Thank you.
All things being equal, we ought to buy from a local contractor, local design firm, local supplier. I'm not asking for a compromise on quality or anything else. Or price, yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions on the bond program update? Okay, Mr. Reed, I have one last item prior to our closed session, and that is in June, the board asked that the college update its written commitment as it relates to creating a safe and equitable environment. And working to respond to the request, it became clear to me and others that we do have an opportunity to more clearly communicate the fact that our colleges' 3D AP strategy is about providing a safe, equitable, and inclusive environment in which to learn. So let me briefly address how these values are fundamental to our work here at the college. Being student ready is about equity and inclusion. It is about knowing and assessing the needs of students, no matter where they are in their personal or academic journey. And being student ready is about the college rising to meet those needs, no matter where they are, whether it be transportation, childcare, emergency financial assistance, just to name a few that we have engaged in. Serving our community is about equity and inclusion. It is about knowing and assessing the community's needs and being flexible and responsible enough to address those needs, no matter what they are. Most recently, making our campuses available to COVID testing sites, in addition to food and school supplies distribution sites, voter registration, and early voting sites are, again, just an example of a few things that we've done to serve the community. And finally, our principal work is about understanding the context of others' lives and making adjustments to how we serve so their needs are met. In that light, I'd like to read our updated commitment to you. In 1965, the citizens of Tarrant County went to the polls and gave life to the vision of establishing a two-year college, known as Tarrant County College today, TCC. And that would serve the needs of the community. Implicit in that vision were the values of equity and inclusion. And for over 50 years, Tarrant County College has found TCC to be a place where one can find open access to quality teaching and learning. As an extension of this mission, our goals to be student ready and serve the community call for TCC to also provide equitable opportunities to learn by rising to meet student needs no matter where they are. TCC believes that providing access to education and an equitable opportunity to learn can and should be a critical component to the continued growth and progress of society. Therefore, we strive to foster an educational environment that helps students learn, live, manage, and lead in a global context. To that end, the work of TCC's 3 goals and 8 principles emphasizes the importance of understanding the context of other lives as a way of developing a deeper appreciation for those that we serve. Appreciating different perspectives and experiences is an integral component of our learning together. Connecting students to learning, personal and social support resources as an additional way to advance access also provides opportunity for success. To ensure that this can be realized, TCC stands firm in its commitment to providing a safe environment free of bigotry, discrimination, persecution, and any form of exclusion or judgment based on race, age, sexual orientation, gender identity, ethnicity, physical ability, religion, political affiliation, or military status for those who seek and provide an education within its doors. However, even with this strong foundation, we must continue to work. The college's commitment to equity and inclusion is and should be a part of the institution's fabric. It is not an ideal to be led by one office or a well-crafted campaign that can stand on its own. Rather, it is a thread that every member of the college community should carry as part of their work. Threads that we weave together to form the college's fabric of equity and inclusion. It is work that is never finished and requires a continuous commitment to improvement. I hope I speak on your behalf when I say that the college and its Board of Trustees stand committed to furthering the work of equity and inclusion at Tarrant County College. We will place this updated statement on our website as an enduring reminder that this is the lens through which we should always view our work and that our commitment to it is never ending. Thank you. We can now move to the closed session, Mr. Heath.
Thank you. That was outstanding. The board will conduct a closed meeting in order to discuss matters permitted by the following sections of Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code: consultation with attorney, legal issues regarding any item listed on today's district work session meeting agenda, deliberations regarding real property, deliberations on personnel matters, deliberations on security devices or security audits. The board will reconvene in open session and act on any item listed on the executive session agenda in accordance with Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code. Okay, we'll now reconvene the work session for our Tarrant County College Board of Trustees. And if there are no objections, we will adjourn this meeting. We are adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Gwen.
Thank you all. Y'all take care.